The 12 worst things seniors do as they age, and why no one talks about them. What if I told you that the most profound transformation you can experience in your later years isn't just about the body slowing down, but about the mind awakening in ways you never imagined? Aging doesn't have to be a slow march into decline, filled with isolation, regrets, and loneliness. In fact, for many, aging can be the greatest opportunity for spiritual growth, deeper wisdom, and true joy. But why is it that some people thrive as they grow older, while others find themselves stuck in bitterness and frustration? In this video, we are going to dive into something that will truly make you reflect on your own journey through life. We will uncover the 12 ugly habits that many seniors unknowingly develop, which slowly erode relationships, drain vitality, and deepen isolation. But here's the twist: these very habits hold the key to personal transformation. Through the lens of Buddhist philosophy, we will explore how to transform each of these habits, turning them from burdens into blessings. Buddhism teaches us that aging isn't a punishment, it's part of the sacred flow of life. The teachings of impermanence, anicca, remind us that everything is constantly changing, and that change is not something to resist, but something to embrace. Dukkha, the concept of suffering, isn't something we need to avoid. It's a part of our human experience that can guide us to wisdom, compassion, and true peace. And the most powerful part of all, non-attachment, letting go of our clinging to the past and our fears for the future, offers us a pathway to freedom and joy, no matter our age. But don't worry, this isn't a lecture on philosophy you'll soon forget. In this video, you will discover practical ways to implement Buddhist teachings into your daily life. You'll learn how to break free from the negative habits that can creep in as you age, habits that, with just a small shift in perspective, can be transformed into opportunities for connection, love, and fulfillment. It's not about getting younger, it's about getting wiser. This video is packed with valuable insights that you'll want to take with you long after it ends. So, if you're ready to make this phase of your life the most profound yet filled with purpose, peace, and connection, I invite you to stay until the end. What you discover here might just be the key to unlocking a vibrant, joyful future. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this isn't just another video. It's the start of a journey that could change everything. With every new subscriber, we build a community of like-minded souls who are committed to embracing aging with grace, wisdom, and compassion. I can't wait for you to join us. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Becoming Too Negative or Critical, a Barrier to Connection. As we age, it's not uncommon to find ourselves slipping into a pattern of negativity. The aches, the creaks, the slow decline of a body that once moved effortlessly, it's all part of the aging process. But what isn't always clear is how easily this can affect the way we view the world, the people around us, and even our own lives. In small ways, we begin to complain more about our bodies, the state of the world, or the way others treat us. These complaints can feel harmless at first, just a way of venting frustrations. But over time, they start to build a barrier between us and those we care about. Take Emma, for example. Emma is a retired teacher in her late 60s, someone who had spent her life caring for others, guiding young minds with patience and dedication. But as she aged, something shifted. The once joyful woman began to complain more frequently about her body, about how she couldn't do the things she used to do, about how the world was changing in ways she didn't like. At first, it seemed like harmless talk, a way to process the reality of aging. But Emma didn't realize that with each complaint, she was pushing her loved ones away. Her children, who once called often, found reasons to stay away. Her friends, who had been so close, started to drift. Emma didn't understand why this was happening. She was just being honest, after all. This is a common experience for many as they age, and it is rooted in a deeper issue: attachment. Buddhism teaches that negative thoughts are born from attachment and fear. When we focus on what is wrong, we are holding on to suffering instead of letting go of it. In the Dhammapada, Buddha reminds us that better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. What does this mean? It means that our words, the things we say, have the power to either create peace or fuel negativity. And the more we focus on the negative, the more we create a reality where negativity is the only thing we see. In Buddhism, the concept of impermanence, anicca, plays a crucial role in how we understand aging. Impermanence teaches us that everything changes. Our bodies, our minds, our relationships, they all change. And with this change comes suffering, but also the possibility for growth. When we resist change, when we cling to the past and what was, we create suffering. But when we embrace the present moment and allow ourselves to experience life as it is, we find peace. Emma's constant complaints about aging were a reflection of her attachment to the way things used to be. She wasn't just frustrated with her body, she was grieving the loss of her youth, of her strength, and of the way things were. The problem was that in clinging to those feelings, she couldn't fully experience the beauty and peace that was available to her in the present. The key to breaking free from negativity is a shift in mindset. Instead of focusing on complaints, we can practice gratitude. This isn't about ignoring the challenges of aging, it's about recognizing the small blessings that still exist in our lives. Instead of starting the day with a litany of grievances, we can start by acknowledging what we are grateful for, no matter how small. Let's think about Emma again. After she realized how much her negativity was affecting her relationships, she decided to make a change. She started each day by reflecting on something she was thankful for. It might have been the sunrise, the laughter of her grandchildren, or the smell of freshly brewed coffee. These small moments of gratitude became a habit, and as she focused on the positive, her relationships began to heal. Her friends reached out more, her children started calling again, and the warmth that had been missing slowly returned to her life. This shift isn't just about feeling better, it's about connecting with others on a deeper level. When we speak from a place of gratitude, we invite others into our lives, and the energy we give out is returned to us. In Buddhism, the practice of right speech reminds us that our words should be kind, truthful, and beneficial. Complaints, while often coming from a place of honesty, can become an obstacle to connection. They can isolate us from the very people who want to share in our lives. Starting each day with gratitude is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to shift our mindset. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we focus on what we have. This simple change can transform not just how we feel, but how we connect with others. By practicing gratitude, we open ourselves up to a world of possibility, peace, and love. The Buddha's teachings on impermanence remind us that nothing stays the same. As we age, we may experience physical changes, but these changes don't define us. They are a part of life, a part of the journey. When we let go of our attachment to the way things were and embrace the present, we open ourselves to the peace and wisdom that comes with it. Emma's story is a reminder that while aging brings challenges, it also brings the opportunity to grow. By letting go of negativity and focusing on gratitude, we can create deeper connections with those around us and live a life filled with peace and joy, no matter what stage of life we're in. Chapter 2: Ignoring Personal Hygiene and Appearance, a reflection of self-respect. As we grow older, it can sometimes be easy to neglect ourselves. The wear and tear of aging, the body's aches, the slower pace of life, the physical signs that we are no longer as youthful as we once were, can often lead us to feel disconnected from ourselves. Many times this manifests in how we care for our bodies. A once cherished routine of self-care can fade, replaced by apathy or weariness. Personal hygiene and appearance, which may once have been a source of pride, can slip to the background. Emma's story is a perfect example of this. As she aged, she started to neglect her appearance. The clothes she once loved now seemed unimportant, and her grooming routine became an afterthought. In Buddhism, the practice of self-care is not seen as vanity, but as an essential act of self-respect. Our bodies are regarded as sacred vessels. They carry us through life, allowing us to experience the world and grow spiritually. In each moment, our body serves as a reflection of the respect and love we have for ourselves. When we stop caring for our bodies, we are also neglecting a deeper part of ourselves, the respect for our own existence, the dignity that comes with being alive. Buddhism teaches that aging is not something to fear or resist. Rather, it is a natural process, one that offers us an opportunity to cultivate wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness. The body, though it may change and eventually fade, is still a precious vehicle for the mind and spirit. It is not something to be rejected or ignored, but something to be honored. Taking care of our bodies is a way to honor our lives, to acknowledge the preciousness of each moment. When we neglect our bodies, whether by ignoring personal hygiene or abandoning self-care, we are essentially rejecting the very vessel that allows us to experience the world. Emma's gradual neglect of her appearance mirrored an internal disconnect. She had stopped seeing herself as worthy of care, and in doing so, she created a deeper sense of isolation and disconnection, not just from others, but from herself. The emotional toll of this neglect was subtle but profound. As she began to disregard her appearance, she began to feel invisible, not just to others, but to herself. But here's the beauty of Buddhism. No matter where we find ourselves, there's always the opportunity to practice self-compassion and make a change. Emma's story offers us a powerful lesson. She realized that when she began to care for herself again, even in small ways, she rekindled a sense of dignity and joy. By choosing clothes that made her feel good, by brushing her hair and taking the time to apply a little makeup, she slowly began to reconnect with her own self-worth. The simple act of caring for her appearance was a form of self-love and an acknowledgement of her value, regardless of her age. Self-care in Buddhism is deeply connected to the practice of right livelihood, which includes treating our bodies with respect. The Buddha emphasized that our physical well-being is essential to our spiritual well-being. In the same way we feed and nourish our minds with wisdom and compassion, we must nourish our bodies with proper care, rest, and attention. This is not about appearance for the sake of vanity, but about honoring the life force that we are entrusted with. The practice of self-care is a spiritual act. It is not only about what we do for ourselves, but about how we see ourselves. When we treat our bodies with care, we are affirming our own worth and honoring our unique existence. Each moment we spend tending to ourselves is a moment of mindfulness, where we show ourselves the same compassion and love we would offer to a loved one. To begin this practice, start small. It doesn't require drastic changes or complex rituals. Start by choosing clothes that reflect how you want to feel, not what others expect. Brush your hair, wash your face, and nourish your skin. These simple acts are reminders that you are worthy of care, that you are deserving of kindness from others, but most importantly, from yourself. When Emma began to care for her physical self again, the transformation wasn't just external. She began to feel better emotionally. She felt seen, not just by others, but by herself. Her body became a reflection of the respect and love she had rediscovered for herself. The connection between self-care and self-respect became clearer, and she realized that taking care of her body was an essential part of maintaining her inner peace and happiness. Buddhism teaches that the body, like all things, is impermanent. It will age and eventually pass. However, in honoring the body while it is here, we find peace in the process. We accept the changes that come with aging, but we also acknowledge the beauty in those changes. Self-care is a way of affirming that we are still worthy of love and respect, regardless of our physical state. By tending to our bodies, we are cultivating self-compassion and deepening our connection to the present moment. We are reminded that, regardless of age or circumstance, we are deserving of love and kindness. In every act of self-care, no matter how small, we are honoring our journey and our sacred existence. So, take a moment today to care for yourself. Start with the basics. Care for your body, feed it with nourishment, give it rest, and treat it with kindness. These small acts will not only help you reconnect with your body, but will also allow you to reconnect with your spirit and the world around you. It is through these acts of self-respect that we find our true worth, not in our appearance, but in our ability to love and honor ourselves at every stage of life. Chapter 3: Becoming stubborn and resistant to change, letting go of attachment. As we age, the temptation to cling to the familiar grows stronger. The world around us is changing at a pace we can no longer control, and with that, there's a quiet fear that accompanies it. The fear of being left behind, the fear of becoming irrelevant, and the fear of losing connection with the world we once knew. Emma's story captures this resistance perfectly. She was hesitant to learn new technologies, to adapt to the evolving ways people communicate, and to understand the changes around her. She longed for the good old days and found comfort in what was known. But in her attachment to the past, Emma found herself more isolated. Her inability to let go of old habits and beliefs about how things should be became a barrier between her and those she loved, leaving her feeling more disconnected than ever. Buddhism teaches us that attachment is a root cause of suffering. We cling to old ways, old beliefs, and familiar patterns because they give us a sense of security. We fear that if we let go of these attachments, we'll lose our place in the world. But the truth, as Buddhism teaches, is that life is in constant flux. Everything is impermanent, and the more we resist the flow of change, the more we invite suffering into our lives. We cannot stop time, nor can we prevent the world from evolving. What we can do, however, is learn how to embrace change with openness and mindfulness. In the Buddhist philosophy of non-attachment, we're encouraged to let go of our attachments to the past, to the way things used to be, to the beliefs and habits that no longer serve us. Holding on too tightly to the past prevents us from fully engaging with the present. As Buddha taught, the root of suffering is attachment. When we become too attached to the old ways, we resist the present moment and the opportunities for growth and connection that come with it. Emma's resistance to learning new technologies was not just about the technology itself. It was about her attachment to what was comfortable. She feared that embracing these changes meant she would be forced to confront her own aging, her own sense of becoming obsolete. But when she finally let go of her fear and allowed herself to learn, she discovered that embracing new ways of connecting, whether through text messages, video calls, or social media, not only kept her connected to her family, but also brought a sense of joy and empowerment she hadn't felt in years. She realized that by holding on to the past, she had been denying herself the chance to grow and stay connected to the world around her. The lesson here is that change is inevitable, and instead of resisting it, we must learn to flow with it. Just as rivers flow, always changing course, we too must adapt and evolve. Embracing change doesn't mean we have to abandon who we are or forget the values and memories that shaped us. It simply means we allow ourselves to experience the present, fully aware of the beauty in the new and the unknown. Buddhism teaches us that letting go of attachment is a form of liberation. When we release the need for things to stay the same, we open ourselves up to new possibilities. Change, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel at first, is part of the process of spiritual growth. Just like Emma, when we choose to embrace change, even in small steps, we not only adapt but also grow stronger, more connected, and more aligned with the present moment. The key to overcoming resistance to change is to take small steps. Start by learning something new each week, whether it's a new skill, a new technology, or a new hobby. Allow yourself to explore what's unfamiliar without fear. Every time you embrace something new, you loosen the grip of fear and attachment. The more we practice this, the more we open ourselves to growth, and the less fearful we become of the unknown. In the end, resisting change only causes us to feel isolated and left behind. When we embrace change with an open heart, we not only keep up with the world, but also remain connected to the people we love and the experiences that shape our lives. Change is a vital part of life, and it is through change that we find deeper wisdom, compassion, and a sense of fulfillment. By letting go of attachment, we learn to flow with life's currents and find peace in the ever-changing journey. Chapter 4: Hoarding and Refusing to Let Go of Clutter. Liberation from Attachments. As we journey through life, our physical surroundings often become a reflection of our inner world. The clutter that accumulates in our homes, old furniture, outdated clothes, piles of paperwork, mementos of times long past, can be more than just a sign of disorganization. It often mirrors the emotional and spiritual clutter we carry within ourselves. Emma's story is a perfect example of this. Her home, once a sanctuary, had slowly become a prison of sorts. Every corner was filled with things that no longer served her, yet she could not bring herself to let them go. Old birthday cards, keepsakes, photographs, each item was attached to a memory, a moment in time that Emma wasn't ready to part with. She feared that by letting go of these things, she would lose part of herself, part of her past. But in holding on to these possessions, Emma was unknowingly holding on to her attachment to the past, preventing herself from fully living in the present. In Buddhism, attachment is seen as one of the primary sources of suffering. The Buddha taught that clinging to material possessions, and even to memories or past experiences, keeps us trapped in a cycle of longing and dissatisfaction. When we attach ourselves to things, we begin to define ourselves by them. These possessions, once sources of joy, can become burdens, weighing us down emotionally and spiritually. The more we hold on, the more we find ourselves stuck in the past, unable to embrace the present or open ourselves to the future. Buddha's teachings on anicca, impermanence, remind us that everything in life is constantly changing. The moments we hold onto so tightly, the past relationships, the once cherished mementos, the old habits, are all temporary. They are fleeting, just like everything else in life. Holding on to them creates a barrier to the natural flow of life, and this resistance to change is what causes suffering. Emma's attachment to her possessions was not just about material things. It was a reflection of her attachment to the past. Each item she kept, whether it was an old letter or a souvenir from a long-forgotten trip, was a way of holding onto something that was no longer relevant in her current life. The act of decluttering then becomes not just a physical task, but a spiritual one. When we let go of physical possessions, we also let go of the emotional and spiritual attachments that come with them. Each item we release, whether it's a piece of clothing that no longer fits, a photograph that reminds us of a painful time, or a memento of a relationship that has ended, is an opportunity to release the emotional weight we've been carrying. As Emma started to declutter her home, she found that her mind and spirit began to feel lighter. The physical space she created by letting go of unnecessary possessions also cleared the emotional space she needed to move forward. Buddhism teaches that by practicing non-attachment, we create the space for peace and clarity. This does not mean we discard everything that holds value to us or that we live in a state of austerity. Rather, it is about being mindful of what we keep and why we keep it. Do these things still serve us? Do they still bring us joy? Or are they reminders of a past we cannot change? burdens that prevent us from experiencing the richness of the present moment. Decluttering is an act of self-liberation. When Emma began to part with the things she had been clinging to, she was not just clearing physical space, she was releasing the emotional burdens that those items represented. Slowly, she began to let go of old regrets, memories of people and times that no longer had a place in her life. As the clutter disappeared, Emma felt a sense of freedom, not just in her home, but in her heart. The act of letting go was liberating her from the weight of the past, allowing her to step into the present with a lighter heart and a clearer mind. If you find yourself overwhelmed by the clutter in your life, start by focusing on one small space each day. It could be a drawer, a shelf, or a corner of a room. As you begin to sort through the physical items, take a moment to reflect on the emotional attachments tied to them. Do these items still serve you, or are they holding you back? Each time you release something, take a deep breath and acknowledge that you are not just letting go of an object. You are letting go of the past, opening up to the present, and making room for new experiences. It is a small but powerful practice that helps us live in the here and now, free from the chains of attachment. In Buddhism, the path to freedom begins with the simple act of letting go. Letting go of the things that no longer serve us, both physically and emotionally, is a powerful way to invite peace and clarity into our lives. By practicing non-attachment, we allow ourselves to be present, to embrace change, and to experience the world with a fresh perspective. And in that space of freedom, we find the opportunity to grow, to heal, and to connect more deeply with ourselves and with others. Chapter 5: Losing Patience with Others Too Quickly, Practicing Loving Kindness. As time passes and we move through the stages of life, it's natural for us to encounter frustration and impatience. But as we age, the tendency to become less patient with others can often creep in unnoticed. Emma's story is a clear example of this. She was once a patient, understanding woman, known for her kind heart and gentle nature. But as she grew older, she began to notice a shift. The world around her seemed to be moving at a faster pace than she was comfortable with, and she found herself becoming increasingly frustrated with those who didn't meet her expectations. Whether it was her family, who couldn't keep up with her pace, or the world in general, which seemed to be evolving faster than she could adjust, impatience started to take root in her heart. In Buddhism, patience is seen as not just the absence of frustration, but as an expression of loving kindness, metta. It is the practice of seeing things as they are, accepting the present moment without rushing to judgment or irritation. Buddha taught that life is full of challenges, but how we respond to these challenges shapes our experience of life. Patience is not about suppressing our feelings of frustration, but about acknowledging them and choosing a response that is rooted in understanding and compassion. When we feel impatience rising, it's easy to be swept up by the current of frustration. We might think to ourselves, why is this taking so long, or why can't things just be easier? But in these moments, the practice of mindful breathing can be a powerful tool. By taking a deep breath, slowing our exhalation, and bringing our attention back to the present, we create space between our irritation and our reaction. This pause allows us to reset, to see the situation with greater clarity, and to respond from a place of kindness rather than frustration. In Emma's case, when she felt her irritation rising, she began to use mindful breathing as a tool to calm herself, to remind herself that everyone, including her, is doing their best in the moment. Buddhism teaches us that impatience often arises from attachment to how we think things should be, attachment to the way we want things to move. This attachment can trap us in cycles of frustration. But when we practice patience, we let go of the need for things to unfold according to our rigid expectations, and instead, we embrace the fluidity of life. This doesn't mean we stop working towards change or improvement, but rather that we allow life to unfold in its own time, free from the pressure of immediate gratification. An important part of this practice is recognizing that we are not alone in our struggles. Everyone is doing the best they can. When we see another person's delay, mistake, or imperfection, it's easy to judge or grow frustrated. But Buddhism encourages us to see others with eyes of compassion. Instead of reacting with irritation, we can take a moment to understand where they are coming from, to remind ourselves that their actions are not a personal affront, but part of the larger web of life. A beautiful example of this comes from the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, a renowned Vietnamese Buddhist monk. He speaks often of deep listening, a practice that involves not just hearing what someone is saying, but listening with full awareness and compassion. In moments where we feel impatience, deep listening can help us connect with others and create the space for understanding. This practice encourages us to not just react to situations, but to engage with them mindfully, allowing ourselves to be present with the person or situation at hand. For Emma, the key to transforming her impatience was shifting her mindset from one of judgment to one of empathy. She began to practice seeing things as they were, not as she wanted them to be, but as they were. This shift in perspective helped her release her attachment to expectations and allowed her to reconnect with others. Instead of focusing on how others weren't meeting her expectations, Emma started to focus on the efforts they were making. She understood that the speed at which things moved wasn't her responsibility. It was about being present and accepting life as it was unfolding. When you find yourself becoming impatient, take a moment to practice mindful breathing. Inhale deeply through your nose, hold the breath for a moment, and then slowly exhale. With each breath, remind yourself that this moment, just as it is enough. You don't need to rush it. With patience, you give space for understanding to flourish, both in your mind and in your relationships. When you allow patience to become a practice, it becomes easier to face frustrations with a calm and compassionate heart, nurturing deeper connections with others. The practice of patience is essential to spiritual growth. It teaches us to let go of our attachment to how things should be and to find peace with how things are. Patience softens our hearts, opens our minds, and creates the space for compassion to grow. As we embrace patience in our daily lives, we not only improve our relationships but also nurture our own inner peace, allowing us to live with greater harmony, acceptance, and love. Chapter 6: Over Talking and Not Listening, the Power of Listening with Compassion. In the hustle of everyday life, it's easy to fall into the habit of speaking more than listening. Emma, like many of us, had a tendency to share her thoughts, stories, and advice, often without taking the time to truly listen to others. She prided herself on her wisdom and experience and thought that by offering guidance, she was helping those around her. But as time went on, Emma began to notice something unsettling. The more she talked, the more her relationships seemed to drift apart. Her daughter, once eager to share her thoughts and experiences, began to withdraw during conversations. Buddhism teaches us that right speech is not just about speaking kindly and truthfully, but also about listening deeply. It is easy to think of listening as a passive activity, but in Buddhist practice, listening is seen as an active act of love and compassion. It's about more than just hearing the words that are spoken. It's about fully engaging with the speaker, trying to understand not just the surface-level words, but the deeper emotions and feelings they may be trying to express. The Buddha often spoke of the importance of mindful listening. He encouraged his followers to listen with full attention, not only with the ears but with the heart and mind. True listening requires patience, humility, and a willingness to suspend judgment. It involves being present in the moment and allowing the other person to share their truth without the need to immediately respond or offer advice. In this way, listening becomes a way of showing respect for the other person's experience, a way of acknowledging their thoughts and feelings without imposing our own. For Emma, the realization that she was talking too much and not listening enough was a turning point. She began to understand that her daughter, like everyone else, needed to be heard. In the past, Emma had been quick to offer advice, believing it was her duty to guide and help. But in doing so, she had inadvertently closed the door to meaningful communication. It wasn't until Emma began to truly listen to her daughter, not just to the words, but to the underlying emotions, the silences, and the deeper needs that her daughter was expressing, that their relationship began to transform. Instead of simply offering her own perspective, Emma started asking her daughter open-ended questions, allowing the conversation to flow naturally. This simple shift in how Emma approached their interactions deepened their connection and helped rebuild the trust and understanding that had been slowly eroded. Listening with compassion does more than just help us understand the other person, it also helps us to better understand ourselves. When we listen deeply, we are forced to step outside of our own perspective and embrace the experience of someone else. This practice of mindful listening nurtures empathy, the ability to feel and understand the emotions of others without judgment. It encourages us to be more patient, more present, and more compassionate. And in doing so, it strengthens the bonds between us and those we care about. Buddhism teaches us that when we listen with the intention of truly understanding, rather than just waiting for our turn to speak, we cultivate a sense of presence. This presence allows us to connect on a deeper level, to feel more deeply, and to respond with greater kindness. Emma's relationship with her daughter blossomed once she made the conscious decision to listen, not just to the words, but to the feelings behind them. She stopped trying to fix everything and instead created space for her daughter to express herself fully. Practical tip: to practice active listening, start by setting aside your thoughts and judgments when someone is speaking to you. Instead of thinking about your response or advice, focus entirely on the speaker. Maintain eye contact, nod, and show empathy through your body language. Ask open-ended questions to encourage the other person to share more deeply. For example, instead of asking, "How was your day?" ask, "What was the best part of your day?" This subtle change invites the other person to reflect more deeply and share more meaningfully. Through active listening, we not only foster connection, but also allow space for mutual growth. It is in this shared space of understanding and compassion that relationships deepen. By listening with full presence, we open the door to a more authentic, loving connection, one where both parties feel truly heard and valued. Emma's story shows us that listening is not just about hearing another person's words, but about hearing their heart. It is through this practice of deep, compassionate listening that we can truly connect with those around us and transform our relationships. So, the next time you engage in a conversation, take a moment to check in with yourself. Are you truly listening? Are you offering your presence, your attention, and your compassion? If you do, you may be surprised at how much deeper your connections become and how much more meaningful your relationships can be. Chapter 7: Pushing People Away Instead of Asking for Help, the Wisdom of Interdependence. As we age, there is a natural inclination to become more independent. We may have spent our lives helping others, taking care of our responsibilities, and being the ones others turn to for assistance. Over time, however, the roles can shift. The body slows down, the tasks that once seemed easy become harder to perform, and the desire to maintain control and independence can lead to a growing sense of isolation. For Emma, this shift was evident in the way she resisted accepting help from those around her. Despite her struggle with heavy bags and the obvious signs that she could use assistance, Emma's pride held her back from accepting the kindness of others. She viewed asking for help as a sign of weakness, an admission that she was no longer the strong, capable person she once was. But in Buddhism, there is a profound lesson that challenges this mindset: interdependence. The Buddhist concept of pradityasamutpada, often translated as dependent origination, teaches us that everything in life is interconnected. No being exists in isolation. Our happiness, well-being, and even our very existence are deeply tied to the connections we share with others. This interdependence is not a weakness, but a recognition of the truth that we are not separate from each other. It is an acknowledgement that our lives are enriched by the relationships we cultivate and that we are stronger when we support each other. Emma's refusal to ask for help was rooted in her attachment to independence. She believed that by accepting help, she would lose control, become vulnerable, or admit that she could no longer manage on her own. But in doing so, she was unintentionally pushing people away. When we refuse help, we create a barrier, not just between ourselves and others, but also between ourselves and the opportunity to experience love and compassion. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but of trust and humility. It is an opportunity to build bridges of connection, to allow others the privilege of offering kindness and support. When we open ourselves to receiving help, we also give others the chance to practice their own virtues: compassion, generosity, and care. Buddhism teaches that true strength is not in doing everything alone, but in recognizing that we are part of a larger web of life, where each being plays a role in sustaining and supporting the other. The concept of Sangha, the community of practitioners, emphasizes the importance of connection. In a community, each person offers what they can, and each person also receives. The Buddha himself sought help from others, including his followers, in his journey toward enlightenment. His willingness to accept support from those around him wasn't a sign of weakness, but an acknowledgement of the interdependent nature of all life. For Emma, the lesson came when she finally allowed someone to help her carry the heavy bag. In that simple act of acceptance, she realized something profound. By allowing someone else to help, she was not losing her independence, but rather creating a deeper connection with another person. That moment of kindness shared between two people nourished both of their hearts. The person helping her felt good knowing they could be of service, and Emma felt lighter, both physically and emotionally, for having allowed herself to accept the kindness offered to her. This was a shift in perspective that began to transform her relationships. She understood that asking for help doesn't diminish her strength, it enhances her humanity. The next time someone offers help, take a moment to reflect on the deeper meaning behind the gesture. It's not just about the task at hand, whether it's carrying a heavy load or doing an errand for you. It's about building a sense of connection, about recognizing that we are all part of a larger whole. By accepting help graciously, you invite the love and support of others into your life, creating opportunities for kindness and compassion to flow freely. When we embrace our interdependence, we acknowledge that we are never truly alone. Our happiness and well-being are enriched by the care and compassion we share with others. In Buddhism, we learn that asking for help is not an act of weakness, but of strength. It takes courage to allow others to be there for us, to trust that our vulnerability is not something to be ashamed of, but something that can bring us closer to others. This practice of humility and trust is not just about asking for help, but about opening our hearts to the support of the world around us. It's a reminder that we are all interconnected, and that our greatest strength lies not in our independence, but in our ability to share love and kindness with others. The next time you find yourself hesitating to ask for help, remember that by doing so, you are honoring your own humanity and allowing others the opportunity to offer their compassion. In this exchange, both you and the other person are nurtured, and a deeper sense of connection is formed. So let go of the idea that asking for help diminishes your strength. Instead, embrace the wisdom of interdependence and open your heart to the support that is always available to you. Chapter 8: Being Too Frugal to Enjoy Life, Finding Balance Between Security and Joy. Emma had always been a careful saver. Throughout her life, she'd worked tirelessly to secure a comfortable future. The years spent diligently building her savings were all aimed at providing for what lay ahead, yet she found herself caught in a cycle of frugality that stripped away the simple joys of living. Each time a thought of spending on something pleasurable crossed her mind, whether it was a trip to visit her old friends, a dinner out, or a new hobby she had always wanted to try, Emma dismissed it, convinced it was unnecessary. Her bank account grew steadily, but with each dollar she saved, a part of her connection to the present moment began to fade. This tendency to hoard wealth, to save obsessively for an uncertain future while neglecting the present, is a trap many fall into, especially as they age. In Buddhism, there is a teaching that offers balance in the face of such tendencies, the concept of madhyama, moderation. Buddha's teachings on moderation remind us that we must avoid extremes in all aspects of life. Just as we should not indulge in excess, we must also not withhold from ourselves what brings us joy and peace. The middle path, as it is called, is about finding a balance between the need for security and the recognition that the present moment is where life happens. Emma's pattern of saving without spending was not rooted in wisdom, but in fear. Fear of the future, fear of not having enough, fear of what might come. Yet in clinging to her savings with such determination, she missed out on the joys that life was still offering her, the joy of travel, the joy of connection, the joy of simply experiencing the world in its fullness. Buddha teaches that wealth, in whatever form it takes, should be used wisely and in balance. It is not for hoarding, but for the nourishment of ourselves and others. Material wealth, when used with wisdom, can enrich not only our lives, but also the lives of those around us. This is where the concept of generosity, another key tenet of Buddhism, comes into play. Generosity is not simply about giving money to others. It's about cultivating an open heart, one that is willing to enjoy life's experiences and share those joys. The purpose of wealth is not to build walls around it, but to use it to create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling. Spending money on experiences, whether it's a trip to see new places, trying a new hobby, or sharing time with loved ones, is not a waste. It is in fact an investment in our happiness and emotional well-being. Experiences create memories, deepen relationships, and offer opportunities for growth in ways that material possessions never will. There's a beautiful Buddhist saying, if you want to be rich, spend your money on things that bring happiness to others. While this quote encourages generosity toward others, it also speaks to the wisdom of spending on experiences and connections that enrich our lives. Happiness in Buddhism is seen not as a fleeting emotion tied to possessions, but as a deep, lasting state of mind that is nurtured through mindfulness, connection, and gratitude. Emma's constant refusal to allow herself the enjoyment of life was robbing her of the joy that could have enriched her later years. An example of this can be found in the teachings of Ajahn Chah, a revered Thai Buddhist monk. He often said that life should be balanced, just like a tree that stands tall but does not sway too much in the wind. Just as a tree requires the right amount of water, sunlight, and space to thrive, our lives require the right balance of work, rest, enjoyment, and generosity. Ajahn Chah often spoke about the importance of being present in the moment and not letting our attachments to the future dictate how we live today. If we are always focused on what we need to accumulate for the future, we miss the beauty and opportunities that life is offering us right now. If you find yourself in the habit of saving excessively and putting off your joy, consider setting aside a small portion of your savings just for happiness. Think of it as a joy fund, something dedicated to enriching your life in the present. Whether it's a weekend getaway, a new hobby, or a dinner with friends, allow yourself to enjoy these moments fully. Life is fleeting, and while planning for the future is important, it should not come at the expense of living fully in the present. Each moment of happiness, whether shared with others or spent in solitude, is worth the investment. By embracing this balanced approach to wealth, you will not only enrich your life, but also your connections with others. The practice of moderation, Madhyama, teaches us that we do not have to choose between saving for the future and enjoying the present. Both are important, but we must learn to navigate them with mindfulness and compassion. When we cultivate this balance, we bring peace to our minds, joy to our hearts, and deeper connection to the world around us. So, take a step today, invest in your happiness. It will enrich not only your own life, but the lives of those you love. Chapter 9, Talking Down to Younger Generations, Bridging the Gap Through Compassionate Communication. As we grow older, it can be easy to get caught up in nostalgia. We reminisce about the good old days and long for the simplicity of the past, often comparing it unfavorably with the present. Emma, like many of us, found herself in this trap. She would often criticize her grandson, Liam, for his use of technology, his constant attention to his phone, his gaming habits, and his preference for digital communication rather than face-to-face conversations. Emma, unable to understand the new world he was living in, would often comment on how things were so much better in her day. The technology he embraced, she believed, was only making him distant and disconnected from the real world. But in doing so, Emma was unknowingly pushing Liam further away, building a barrier between them that was fueled by judgment and misunderstanding. Buddhism teaches us a valuable lesson about right speech, a practice that goes beyond the words we say to how we say them. Right speech is not just about speaking truthfully and kindly, but also about being mindful of our tone, our judgments, and our ability to listen. It encourages us to avoid the impulse to criticize or condemn, especially when we do not fully understand the experiences of others. Each generation, after all, has its own struggles, challenges, and ways of navigating the world. The world changes in ways we may not fully grasp, but that does not mean we should dismiss it. Instead of rushing to judgment, Buddhism teaches us to be curious and compassionate, to approach differences with an open mind and a willingness to learn. When Emma criticized Liam for his use of technology, she was operating from a place of attachment to the past. Her understanding of connection was rooted in her own experiences, face-to-face conversations, handwritten letters, and spending time together without distractions. But Liam's world, shaped by rapid technological advancements, was different. His sense of connection, communication, and entertainment revolved around digital spaces, which, in his experience, felt just as meaningful as the relationships Emma had built in the past. Emma's judgment, rather than fostering understanding, created tension. Buddhism teaches us that judgment, especially when it comes from a place of ignorance or fear, can be a form of suffering, not just for the person being judged, but for the one passing judgment as well. The Buddha's teachings on right speech urge us to speak with compassion, wisdom, and understanding. When we judge others, we close ourselves off to the possibility of connection and growth. But when we approach others with curiosity and compassion, we open the door to mutual respect and deeper relationships. The key here is mindfulness, being aware of the words we speak, the judgments we pass, and the impact our words can have. Instead of immediately criticizing Liam for his habits, Emma could have taken a different approach. She could have asked him to share his perspective, to explain why he enjoyed his games or why he preferred texting over calling. By shifting from judgment to curiosity, she could have learned about his world, about the challenges and joys he found in his digital interactions. Instead of seeing Liam's choices as wrong, she could have seen them as a part of his journey, just as her choices were a part of hers. This shift in perspective is powerful. Buddhism teaches us that compassion and curiosity are essential practices for building understanding between people of different backgrounds, experiences, and generations. By asking questions and listening deeply, we open ourselves to the possibility of learning from others, of seeing the world through their eyes, and of finding common ground in places we might have otherwise overlooked. Buddhism reminds us that there is no one right way to live life, and each person's path is shaped by their unique experiences. By practicing right speech, we create a space where we can connect with others, not based on our judgments of them, but based on our willingness to listen and understand. Emma's relationship with Liam began to transform when she made the effort to listen to him without immediately offering her criticism. She started asking him about his games, showing genuine interest in his world, and most importantly, she refrained from belittling him for the things he enjoyed. Over time, this shift allowed them to build a stronger, more compassionate connection. Next time you find yourself about to criticize a younger person's choices, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, how can I be more curious? Rather than focusing on what's wrong or unfamiliar, try asking open-ended questions that allow them to share their perspective. For example, instead of saying, "Why do you waste so much time on that phone?" Try, "I've noticed you really enjoy your games. What do you like about them?" This small shift in approach can transform tension into connection, open doors to mutual understanding, and help you see the world through someone else's eyes. Through this practice, you not only foster deeper relationships, but also cultivate patience and wisdom in your own heart. By choosing curiosity over judgment and compassion over criticism, we honor the diverse paths that each person walks. And in doing so, we bridge the generational gaps that often separate us, finding common ground where once there was division. Just as Buddhism teaches, the practice of right speech isn't just about speaking kindly, but also about listening with an open heart, ready to learn and understand. Chapter 10, Holding On to Grudges and Regrets, the Path to Forgiveness and Freedom. As we age, the weight of past grudges and regrets can become increasingly difficult to bear. The memories of past wrongs, missed opportunities, and the could-have-beens are often carried with us like heavy stones in a backpack, weighing us down and clouding our present. For Emma, this weight was particularly evident in her relationship with her daughter. Years of unresolved anger, hurt feelings, and unmet expectations had built up over time, forming a barrier between them that no amount of love could seem to break. Emma had carried these emotions for so long that they became a part of her, and she was unable to see her daughter or herself through a lens of peace. Buddhism teaches us that resentment and regret are burdens that only serve to keep us trapped in the past. These emotions are tied to attachment, an attachment to how we believe things should have been, or how we think people should have treated us. This attachment can create a cycle of suffering, where the mind continually returns to past hurts, feeding the fire of anger and regret. The Buddha's teachings on dukkha, the inherent suffering in life, remind us that clinging to negative emotions only deepens that suffering. When we hold on to grudges, we are attaching ourselves to pain and disappointment, which clouds our ability to experience peace and joy in the present moment. Emma's resentment toward her daughter was a perfect example of this attachment. She believed that her daughter had wronged her, that she had not received the respect and love she deserved. These feelings had festered over time, becoming a barrier to healing. The more Emma held onto her anger and her regrets about the past, the more she distanced herself from her daughter, from her ability to forgive, and from any possibility of true peace. It was only when Emma began to recognize the burden of these emotions that she could begin the process of letting go. In Buddhism, forgiveness is seen as a vital practice for freeing ourselves from the chains of suffering. Forgiveness does not mean excusing past wrongs or pretending that everything is okay. Rather, it is an intentional act of choosing peace over pain. Forgiveness is about releasing the hold that resentment has on our hearts so that we no longer allow the past to control us. It is not about forgetting what happened, but about choosing to no longer let it define our present or our future. The Buddha teaches us that forgiveness is not only for others, but also for ourselves. Holding on to resentment is a form of self-inflicted suffering. When we carry these negative emotions, we are allowing the past to govern our present experiences. We hold ourselves hostage to events and people that no longer serve us. Forgiveness, therefore, becomes an act of self-liberation. It allows us to heal from the wounds of the past, to release the grip that anger and regret have on our hearts, and to move forward unburdened. This was the path Emma had to walk. In the beginning, forgiveness seemed like an impossible task. How could she forgive her daughter for the hurt she had caused? How could she release all the pain and resentment that had built up over the years? But through the practice of mindfulness, Emma began to realize that holding onto these emotions was not helping her heal. It was keeping her stuck in a cycle of suffering. Emma began by acknowledging her feelings, sitting with her anger and her regret without judgment. She allowed herself to feel the pain, but then she chose to let it go. Forgiveness is not a one-time event, but a process. It requires patience and practice, and it can take time to fully release the grip of resentment. Emma's path toward forgiveness began with small steps. She wrote a letter to her daughter, expressing her feelings not to blame, but to release the emotions she had held inside. She didn't expect anything in return. It wasn't about getting an apology, but about freeing herself from the past. In Buddhism, this process of letting go of resentment and regret is a form of metta, loving kindness. By practicing loving kindness toward ourselves, we can begin to soften the heart and make space for healing. When Emma chose to forgive, not only was she allowing peace to enter her own heart, but she was also creating an opening for reconciliation with her daughter. This is the transformative power of forgiveness. It not only heals the wounds between us, but also heals the wounds we carry within. Start by releasing one grudge or regret today. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, just a small, intentional step toward forgiveness. You might begin by writing a letter, one that you may or may not send, where you express your feelings and release the burden of resentment. Alternatively, you can reflect quietly on the emotions you hold, acknowledging them and letting them go bit by bit. This practice may take time, but every step you take helps release the hold that the past has on your present. The more you practice forgiveness, the lighter your heart will become, and the more open you will be to the possibility of healing. Letting go of grudges and regrets is not about excusing the wrongs done to us. It is about choosing to free ourselves from the weight of those wrongs. It is about reclaiming our peace and our joy in the present moment. As we forgive, we release the chains that bind us to the past and step into the fullness of the present, unburdened and free. This is the path to true liberation, the path that Buddhism invites us to walk every day. And in that freedom, we find the space to love more deeply, to connect more authentically, and to live with greater peace. Chapter 11: Ignoring Health Problems, Honoring the Body as a Temple. As we age, it is not uncommon to ignore the subtle signs of physical discomfort. The creaks in our joints, the occasional headache, or the occasional dizziness might seem like mere inconveniences, nothing more than the effects of aging. We push them aside, thinking that these issues are just a part of the natural process of growing older. However, as the Buddha taught, our bodies are not to be treated with neglect. Rather, they are to be honored as sacred vessels, temporary, yes, but invaluable for the journey of life. In Buddhism, the body is viewed as a temple, deserving of care, respect, and mindfulness. This mindfulness towards our health is integral to the Buddhist concept of right livelihood. Right livelihood doesn't just apply to how we earn our living, but to the choices we make that support our overall well-being. Taking care of our health, treating our bodies with respect, and listening to the signals they give us are all essential practices of right livelihood. In Buddhism, this extends beyond our work and our relationships to our very physical existence. The practice of self-care is an act of love for the body that sustains us, and neglecting it is a form of self-harm. Emma's story is a vivid reminder of how easily we can fall into the trap of ignoring our health problems, convincing ourselves that they are minor and will go away with time. For years, Emma had ignored the dizziness that plagued her, attributing it to old age, fatigue, or just a passing issue. She didn't want to acknowledge that her body was signaling that something was wrong. The problem didn't seem serious enough to seek medical help, so she pushed it aside. But eventually, her body's signals became louder. The dizziness led to a fall that left her injured. The lesson here is clear. When we ignore the subtle warnings our bodies give us, we risk more serious consequences. Buddhism teaches that the body, though temporary, is a precious tool for our spiritual journey. We are urged to treat it with mindfulness and care. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha encourages us to be aware of the body's sensations and signals, to understand its needs, and to act with wisdom. This includes noticing when something doesn't feel right and addressing it with mindfulness. The body's discomforts are not just physical, they are signals that require our attention and understanding. When we neglect these signals, we are ignoring the natural wisdom that our bodies offer us. Ignoring our health can become a form of spiritual neglect, preventing us from living fully and with vitality. When Emma finally began to pay attention to her health, she realized how much she had neglected her body's needs. The dizziness wasn't something to dismiss, it was her body's way of calling for attention. Buddhism teaches us that physical health and spiritual well-being are deeply interconnected. By taking care of our bodies, we create a strong foundation for our minds and spirits to flourish. The body's signals are an invitation to practice mindfulness, to listen closely, to be present with what is happening in the moment, and to take appropriate action. In Buddhism, we also learn that attachment to our bodies, though temporary, can be harmful if we ignore its needs or push it too hard in the name of attachment to life. At the same time, the Buddha encourages us not to fear the inevitable decay of the body. Instead, we are urged to treat it with care and respect, knowing that by doing so, we honor the precious life force within us. Start by paying attention to the subtle signals your body sends you every day. If you feel an ache, dizziness, or unusual fatigue, don't ignore it. Take the time to listen to your body and, when necessary, seek the help of a medical professional. The act of taking care of your health is an act of love and respect for yourself. When you make your health a priority, you not only honor the body but also create space for a fuller, more vibrant life. When we are mindful of our health, we live with greater energy, vitality, and presence, enabling us to engage more fully in the world around us and continue our spiritual journey without the burden of physical neglect. The body is a sacred vessel, not perfect but precious. Through mindful care, we can ensure that we honor its needs, allowing us to live with greater clarity, energy, and peace. Chapter 12, Losing the Joy of Life, Returning to the Present Moment with Gratitude. As the years go by, it's easy to forget the simple joys that once filled our lives with excitement and lightness. The laughter of children, the thrill of spontaneous adventure, the warmth of a hug, these moments can begin to feel distant as we age. For Emma, this loss of joy was subtle at first. She had always been the type of person who found pleasure in the small things, whether it was enjoying a cup of tea on a quiet morning or sharing stories with friends. But as time passed, she found herself losing that spark. Life had become routine, and the enthusiasm that once seemed so natural faded into the background. Her world became more about managing responsibilities, dealing with aches and pains, and trying to keep up with a changing world. The simple joy of life felt out of reach. In Buddhism, joy is seen as an essential part of the spiritual journey. The Buddha taught that happiness doesn't arise from external circumstances or possessions. Instead, it comes from how we relate to the world around us and how we cultivate inner peace and mindfulness. Emma's story illustrates this beautifully. She became so focused on what she was lacking, the energy, the vitality, the ease of youth, that she overlooked the joy that was still present around her. It wasn't until a friend invited her to spend time together that she realized what had been missing. That invitation, a simple act of kindness, opened the door for Emma to reconnect with the joy she had forgotten. Through the shared laughter, the conversations, and the warmth of friendship, Emma rediscovered her ability to enjoy life, no matter her age. Buddhism teaches us that joy is always within us, even when we don't feel it. Our minds may become clouded by distractions, by worries about the future, or by regrets about the past, but joy remains a constant part of our nature. The Buddha emphasized that mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment, is the key to reconnecting with this joy. When we practice mindfulness, we bring our awareness to the simple pleasures of life, no matter how small they may seem. The taste of a warm meal, the feeling of the sun on our face, the sound of laughter, the beauty of a blooming flower, all of these are sources of joy, waiting for us to notice them. Emma's journey back to joy began when she allowed herself to be present with her friend and enjoy the moment without worrying about what was missing. She didn't need to go on a grand adventure or find something new to feel joy. She simply needed to stop and appreciate the gifts that were already there. This practice of returning to the present moment, of acknowledging the blessings in our lives, is at the heart of Buddhist practice. By practicing gratitude, we open our hearts to the beauty of the world around us and invite joy to flow freely. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is that life is impermanent and everything, including our emotions, is subject to change. Just as the seasons change, so too do our experiences of joy and sorrow. However, Buddhism reminds us that we can choose how we respond to life's ups and downs. We can choose to cultivate joy even in the midst of challenges. This doesn't mean denying our difficulties or pretending that everything is always fine. It simply means that we can shift our focus to what is positive, to what brings us peace, and to what brings us joy in the present moment. Laughter, play, and lightness are not just for the young. They are essential for a life well lived at any age. The Buddha himself is often depicted with a joyful expression, reflecting the profound joy that arises when we let go of attachment and embrace the present. In his teachings, the Buddha spoke of the importance of mudita, sympathetic joy, or the ability to rejoice in the happiness of others. This practice encourages us to take joy in the happiness around us, whether it's the joy of a friend, the joy of a child, or even the joy of nature itself. By practicing mudita, we not only cultivate joy for ourselves, but also deepen our connections with others. To reconnect with the simple pleasures of life, start each day by acknowledging something you are grateful for. It could be as simple as the warmth of the sun or the sound of birds chirping outside. Take a moment to pause and appreciate these small joys. If you're feeling disconnected, spend time with loved ones, go for a walk in nature, or watch a funny movie, anything that reminds you of the joy that is always present in your life. As you make gratitude a daily practice, you'll notice how your attitude shifts. Life becomes less about what is missing and more about what is already abundant. In doing so, you'll invite more joy into your life and remember that, no matter your age, there is always room for laughter, for play, and for the simple joys of being alive. The beauty of life is that joy is always within our reach, waiting to be rediscovered. By practicing mindfulness and gratitude, we return to the present moment and reconnect with the joy that resides within us. As Emma's story shows, joy isn't something we need to seek outside of ourselves. It's something we can cultivate within, simply by paying attention to what is already there. So take a moment today to look around, breathe in the beauty of the world, and allow yourself to feel the joy that is already present in your life. It is in this simple act of being present that we rediscover the essence of happiness and a life well lived. As we stand at the crossroads of aging, many of us may find ourselves wondering what lies ahead. It's easy to slip into the belief that aging is synonymous with decline, with the inevitable fading of our bodies and minds. But as we've learned through the teachings of Buddhism, aging is not a period of loss, it is a time of transformation. The later years of life are an opportunity to shed the burdens of the past, to release attachments, and to embrace the richness of spiritual growth, wisdom, and compassion. Each stage of life, no matter how advanced, offers a chance to deepen our understanding of ourselves and our connection to the world around us. Just like Emma, we can all face the inevitable changes of aging with a renewed sense of purpose, by letting go of the ugly habits that so easily creep in. It is through releasing these negative patterns, the grudges, the regrets, the attachments to outdated ways of thinking, that we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. By doing so, we open the door to a life that is not bound by the past, but instead is full of peace, connection, and joy. Aging doesn't have to be about the body's decline, it's about how we relate to those changes. The wisdom and compassion we cultivate as we grow older allow us to embrace life with greater clarity and deeper understanding. As our bodies may change, our ability to transform ourselves from within remains limitless. The way we choose to live, how we relate to others, and how we practice mindfulness can turn what some perceive as a decline into a beautiful, fulfilling journey. Buddhism teaches us that the present moment is all we truly have. By embracing mindfulness, by letting go of attachments to both the past and the future, we can find peace in the here and now. Aging gracefully is not about ignoring physical changes or denying the reality of aging. It's about accepting those changes with a heart full of compassion for ourselves and for others. It's about living with an open heart and an open mind, ready to embrace each new chapter of life with joy and wisdom. Just as Emma's story illustrates, it's never too late to make a change. Whether it's cultivating a positive attitude, embracing new technologies, releasing old grudges, or simply learning to appreciate the present moment, every small step we take toward mindfulness brings us closer to living a life of peace and happiness. So take a moment today to reflect on your own path. Are there areas where you are holding on to old habits or grudges? Is there room for more joy, more compassion, more presence in your life? The beauty of aging with wisdom lies in the knowledge that we have the power to change, to grow, and to live a fulfilling life no matter what our age. We all have the opportunity to walk this path with grace, wisdom, and compassion, embracing the beauty of aging with open hearts. Don't let another moment pass by without fully embracing the transformative power of mindfulness in your life. And remember, this journey of self-awareness and growth is not one you have to walk alone. If this video resonated with you, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your feedback helps us create more content that supports your journey toward a mindful, peaceful, and joyful life. Share your thoughts and let us know how you are embracing the wisdom of aging. Together, we can continue to walk this path, learning and growing with every step.